All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I just wanted to start by thanking all of you all for taking the time out of your day to attend this webinar. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I know we're all going through some difficult and challenging times at the moment, and I'm hoping today, afterwards, we can leave you with a few more tools to help you all better tackle some of the challenges that we're all facing at the moment. And what these tools I'm talking about here is basically allowing you the ability to better communicate more effectively during these times and into the future as well. Whether it be with your team, if you're a business leader or a manager, or to people professionally in your network, or if you're just privately as well, like with your husband, your wife, your family, your kids. What we're about to dive into today will help us do exactly that. First, let me introduce myself and Sterning. My name's Sam Elderfield, for all of you who don't know me, and I'm a partner here at Sterning Recruitment. And what I do is I specialize in building software development teams or technology teams here in Sydney, and I focus specifically with software engineers and developers in Sydney. Sterning's built up of expert recruitment consultants that operate independently underneath the Sterning banner. We've got specialists in the area of HR, headed up by the wonderful Emma Egan and Bianca Clifton. Design by Nick Berman. We've got data, headed up by Nicole Penn-Decker, who specializes in everything to do with data, analysts, scientists, that sort of thing. We've got Sam Philpott, who works in the area of business support and finance. And also over in Western Australia, we've got Sam Sudesi, who is looking after sales into engineering teams over there. So if you're looking for a bit of help in finding the right people for your team during these times and sort of navigating through a bit of the noise that's out there, feel free to reach out to us and we can have a chat. And on the other side of the coin as well, if you're looking for help to secure your next role or a bit of career advice, whether it be CV formatting, interview preparation, or even some LinkedIn branding, please feel free to reach out to anyone here at Sterning for a chat. Secondly, let's introduce Kaushik, who's our guest today, who I'm so delighted to be talking to you about. That's Dr. Ram. I'm so excited to be speaking to you. Kaushik, who's a leading neuroscientist who is currently working at the Sydney University's Brain and Mind Institute. And he's working on a confidential AI product. Kaushik's work is focused in connecting the link between your brain, mind, body, and heart. He holds a PhD in neuroimaging genetics, and his work looks at bringing people into balance and integrating their physical, emotional, and mental systems. He's a keynote speaker who's featured at TEDx Sydney, Vivid, and the Mind and Body and Spirit Festival. He's also the author of a best-selling book, The Hidden World, which he wrote in dream state. And we're going to talk a little bit more about states later on as well. He's coached CEOs, high-performing teams on how to better manage stress, anxiety, and to communicate more effectively as well. And today we're here to get a little bit geeky on how we communicate. Kaushik, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for the beautiful introduction. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to share with you guys this talk. To begin with, one of the things I'd like to say is one of the things is that the hardest thing to communicate is often what we find challenging. And it's often because the more meaning we attach to what we want to say, the harder it is to say it. And we might find this in scenarios such as going for a job interview or asking for a pay rise or even having a conflict with a coworker. And when we don't address this, it often stands between what we want and it often limits us. So this is what I'd like to talk to you about today on how to communicate a little bit more efficiently by managing your own state. So if you have, any other ideas on like what you find difficult in communicating, you can share it with me on the chat box, and I'll see if I can answer it through while giving this talk. a little bit about the research that I do, I'll share with you a little video here. So hopefully you can see my screen. So at the University of Sydney, I'm basically working on a AI project, which is really looking at how to streamline the clinical workflow by integrating an AI workforce in there. And we're looking predominantly at radiology, and this will allow us to basically use an AI workforce for diagnosis. For example, in neurological conditions such as MS or Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. So this is something that we're developing, and it's currently in the research and development phase. But despite the advancements in technology, one of the things that is that hasn't changed much is the hardwiring of our brain. And this is actually quite amusing because although we have evolved into such advanced thinking creatures, the hardwiring, the infrastructure of the brain is still operating in the same way it did in every other creature that has a nervous system. And so I'm sure sometimes when we are threatened, we experience a scenario where we go into a spaghetti brain, we can't really think clearly. And these are moments when we are often quite stressed and we are threatened. And this function actually operates the same way in animals as it does in humans. And the interesting thing here is that the fight or flight mechanism is operating when we go into a threat response. And the fight or flight mechanism also not only happens biologically, but happens in our psychological processes as well. And I'll share with you how it happens in our own communication. So if we go into the fight response, we sometimes will become very defensive or aggressive in a conversation. If we go into the flight response, that's when we are avoiding a conversation that needs to happen, or we find distractions and avoid the conversation entirely. And at certain points, we can also go into a freeze response. And this is a very catatonic response where the body might even shut down, and verbal communication might be very difficult to communicate. So in those circumstances, nonverbal communication becomes quite essential. So how do we avoid the spaghetti brain? I'd like to share with you an exercise to demonstrate this. So maybe I'll have you as a volunteer, Sam. If you can.
No
yeah.
worries, I'm here. You can, yeah.
Yeah. So Sam, in this exercise, I have a pen here, and I'd like you to ask me for this pen.
You're gonna Wolf of Wall Street me.
Sorry?
You're gonna Wolf of Wall Street me. Sell the pen. No.
Yeah. Wolf of Wall Street. So you can ask me for this pen.
Kaushik, I need to do some writing, mate. Can I borrow that pen?
No, Sam. Can you ask me again?
Mate, I really need to get some documents signed, and I don't have a pen, and it's quite a matter of urgency that I sign these documents. I need your pen, Kaushik. Can you please give me your pen?
Sorry, Sam. Can't do that. Can you?
Mate, why not? You've got the pen. Give me the pen.
All right, Sam. Thank you so much for this this little demo. And basically, what I wanted to show there is that there's so many ways in which we are asking for what we want. And when I denied Sam the pen the first time, he went from asking for the pen politely into a bit of frustration. He started telling me why he needed the pen. Hopefully that would give a reason for me to give Sam the pen. And when I declined it the third time, there was a little bit of frustration and anger there as well. So sorry to do that to you, Sam, but this is when we start escalating a conversation, and the tension starts to escalate as well. So these are often times when we are resorting to ways we've learned to communicate, as we've done in previous scenarios. And often these are coming from a set of limiting beliefs. So one of the ways we can limit ourselves is if we think that things need to be perfect. And if that is running as a core belief in our minds, we start finding faults in people, and we start looking at where they've gone wrong. And sometimes this becomes pervasive in our communication. Another limiting belief is when we feel unworthy. And in these scenarios, one of the things that happens is we start to try to please people in order to get what we want. And we are very polite, and even politeness can be a form of manipulation. Other ways we can be quite limiting is that we can think that we're not good enough. And so we tend to try harder, and we, in that scenario, are very goal-directed. And we find that communication becomes very much based on the bottom line. And this can also limit us. And often these limiting beliefs can become a form of disability in a communication. We might find that we don't have the capacity, or we feel powerless in a conversation sometimes. And this becomes very apparent in an organizational structure where there's a hierarchy. So how do we actually overcome this? In order to demonstrate this, I'll do another exercise. And in this exercise, I'd like everyone to join in as well. So this exercise really shows us what our unconscious biases are. And in order to do this exercise, I will ask everyone to look around the room and count as many blue things that you see in the room. And I'll give everyone 10 seconds to do this. So looking around, counting as many blue things. And now I'd like everyone to close their eyes and remember how many black things there were in the room. So you have 10 seconds, closing your eyes and counting the black things in your mind. Great, you can open your eyes now, and hopefully you're observing that there are more black things than you had remembered. And this is because when we prime the brain to look at a particular goal or objective, the brain focuses on that directly, and it actually filters out the other things that might be around us. And this happens in conversation as well, because when we're so focused on what we want, or when we attach too much meaning to our conversation, then we start to miss out on the full picture. And this exercise is one of the ways of elaborating that. When we are focused on just one thing, we might miss out on other possibilities. So the reason the brain does this is because it is limited by a certain set of resources. And the brain, it really is a very expensive structure to run. Even at rest, it uses about 20% of the body's metabolic energy. And this is at rest. So in order to optimize the energy performance of the brain uses a few things that allow it to operate at a optimal state. So one is processing speed. By the time something reaches our conscious perception, at least 200 milliseconds have passed. So the brain really is lagging 200 milliseconds behind real time. And in these scenarios, our instincts are often operating in order to protect us from scenarios that happen quite rapidly. And the brain is also limited by working memory. And working memory really is the amount of information you can hold in your brain in real time. So if I gave you guys 3 names to remember, that would probably be fairly easy. But if I gave you guys 3 phone numbers to remember, that would be a lot more difficult than remembering 3 names. And another thing the brain is limited by is attention span. And this is what we can zoom in on and focus our attention on. So given these limitations, the brain really focuses on what is of immediate importance, and what signifies this importance is often danger and things that cause stress, fear, or pain. And this is ultimately what the nervous system responds to. So the nervous system itself is actually quite simple in the way it operates, unlike the brain. So the brain has so many different functions: communication, emotion, memory, sensory motor control. All these functions are jumbled up in the brain, and functions that require the most importance are defined by fear. But the nervous system is actually binary. It only operates under 2 states. One is fight or flight, which we call the sympathetic nervous system, and the other is the parasympathetic state, which is the rest and restorative state. And given that the nervous system is binary, what often happens is when we go into the fight or flight stage, we lose perception of our own bodily processes. And this disconnects us from our own bodies, and we become less in tune with what is actually going on. We go straight into our heads, and a form of tunnel vision starts to happen, similar to the exercise of counting how many blue things were in the room. So in order to restore our perception back into the body, we actually strengthen the communication between brain and body through what I call a vagal tone. And this is really the best thing you can do to improve your strength of communication, because it is not just communication between brain and body, but it is the way you communicate with the world as well. So how do you strengthen the vagal tone? Vagal tone really is a way of heightening the sensory perception of the body. So the higher the vagal tone, the better the communication between brain and body, and the lower the vagal tone, the more disease there is, both mental, physical, and physiological. And just to give you an example, there was a study that was done in the Netherlands in 2014. And in that study, they took a group of 24 volunteers, and they divided this group into two groups of 12. And they gave one group training in the vagal tone, and the other group had no training at all. And then they injected both these groups with an experimental bacteria, which gave severe flu symptoms for the next 3 hours. And the untrained group actually had no symptoms at all. They were able to come out of it without any disease. But that was the trained group. The untrained group actually had severe flu symptoms for the next 3 hours. So by heightening the vagal tone, it allowed the body to operate in a much more effective manner than it did when there was no training at all. So not only is vagal tone used in treatment for disease, but it's also used in treatment for mental diseases as well. It's been used in the treatment for depression and chronic fatigue syndrome, and it's also a treatment response for various other healthcare conditions and interventions. And so to dive in a little bit deeper on how to strengthen your vagal tone, what we really use to measure the vagal tone is what we call heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is the moment-to-moment fluctuation in your heart rate. So the peak-to-peak variability in the heart rate might be 250 milliseconds for one beat, 506 milliseconds for the second beat, 430 milliseconds for the third beat. And what we want is this variability to be as high as possible. So the higher the heart rate variability, the better the vagal tone. And what this really means is that your body is able to go into heightened states and then return back to baseline very, very quickly. So for example, if a threat happens, our heart rate can accelerate, but when the threat disappears, our body can calm down and return back to baseline. And when this doesn't happen, we find that it starts affecting our mood. We might have a strong conversation with someone, and then when we leave the conversation, that conversation still starts running in our heads and maybe even carries on throughout the day, and it takes a long while for us to return back to our normal state. So by heightening the vagal tone, we're able to communicate very effectively, but also return back to our normal state. And so how do you heighten the vagal tone? It's actually very, very simple, because our hearts are intimately linked to our breathing. Every time we inhale, the heart rate rises, and every time we exhale, the heart rate slows down. And by prolonging the exhale, we can actually slow down the heart rate and the rhythms of the heart voluntarily. So a general rule is to keep the exhale at least twice as long as the inhale. And once you start doing this, it starts to happen not only as a practice, but in real time as well. So there might be scenarios where you do feel threatened and the vagal breathing starts to kick in by itself. And this is where it truly becomes quite powerful, because then when the body is in a calm and relaxed state, you start to become perceptive of the information within the body, and things like gut instincts or intuitions of the heart start to emerge. So gut instinct, for example, is very powerful in communication, in that when someone is speaking about something, you might detect that something's not quite right. And this is a similar response that happens viscerally when we perhaps eat something that is a little bit off. We go, this doesn't feel right, so we discard that. And it happens psychologically as well. So when we hear something that feels a little bit off, we feel it in our gut and we go, oh, wow, this doesn't really quite feel right. And it's a very important tool for discernment. And intuition is also very, very powerful. And intuition and creativity go hand in hand as well, because sometimes we are trying to solve a problem with a team and we are putting our heads together, brainstorming, and often the best ideas come to us when we are least expecting it. Perhaps when we are going for a quiet walk, or when we are in the shower. And so the best way to use our intuition is when we are in a meeting and we become very playful And in these times, because play and fear cannot coexist, it allows us to think more creatively, and intuitive ideas and visions start to drop in. And so when we apply this as a practice, then we do start to become more and more innovative in the way we think and the way we communicate. So ultimately, what I'd like to end this talk is with the fact that the strength of your communication really comes down to how well you are connected with yourself. And the best way to connect with yourself is by heightening your connection with your own body. And the better the communication with your own body, the better you will be able to communicate and get what you desire. So hopefully all of this information was relevant to whatever you're doing. And I'm happy to stay on and answer a few questions as well. Thanks, Sam.
Mate, thank you very much, Kaushik. Thank you so much. So I think it, yeah, think of what you said. It's, I love what you're talking about. What was the breathing technique you said when you exhale longer?
Vagal breathing.
Vagal breathing. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the part about when we breathe in, we accelerate the heart, but when we breathe out, we decelerate the heart, so we can control that. So yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, guys, if anyone's got any questions, we've got a couple of questions coming through here. There's one from Martina McDermott about is this work related to Wim Hof?
So the example that I shared with the group of 24 volunteers, that example did come from the Wim Hof breathing technique. The techniques that I talk about in my own context are not related to the Wim Hof techniques. The exercises that I teach are very much body-based exercises, and I use things like stress, fear, and pain to teach the body, because in order to teach the nervous system, you have to use a language that the nervous system understands, and it's actually nonverbal. So instead of simply talking about it, I teach the nervous system experientially, and this is through the language that it understands, which is pain, fear, and stress. So the Wim Hof techniques are really powerful. I've personally taken part in it, but yeah, the body of work that I teach is not just visceral, but it actually allows various forms of mental benefits as well, and it is designed to really recover from mental health conditions, as well as promote the body-based connection.
Wow. Okay. Mate, can you just do me a favor? Can you turn my video on? Is that all right? Make me the host so I can turn it on. We've got a very, very good question coming through. Yeah, to all the people who've joined a bit late, the video has been recorded. So sorry, the webinar has been recorded, so you can tune in to all for a bit later. Bishan has given a great question here. He's saying he's an emergency physician who works in a very high pressure environment where multiple sensory inputs come at him at once, alarm bells, people's yelling, screaming from all different things. What he's asked is, I guess, like, how can he best invoke vagal breathing when in a time of multiple distractions? Have you had experience of training in this in such high pressure environments? Cheers, Bishan.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the techniques itself is designed for high pressure scenarios. The vagal breathing technique that I use has been adopted actually from the Russian military. And in those circumstances, the military assume that the scenario they're working with is actually beyond their control. They will be overwhelmed, they would be outnumbered, they might have an amputation. It's under the most stressful scenarios. So how does your body operate in those circumstances? When the mind is overloaded, we default to being to operating from an autopilot state, and that creates this tunnel vision, and we don't actually see the full picture. So when we calm down and relax the nervous system, even under those high pressure scenarios, it gives the brain the capacity to then prioritize. And that's why we have triage. And Bishan, I'm sure you're very, very familiar with it. So in those scenarios, instead of getting overwhelmed, instead of going out of your body and start, observing all the things that are going on, the best thing you can do is return to your body. And once you are coherent within yourself, then you have a greater capacity to respond to whatever situation that needs your attention the most. And I know it's a very, very difficult thing, especially under the current circumstances. But yeah, the more calm and relaxed you are using the breathing techniques that I've just mentioned, the better your capacity is to respond in these moments.
Okay, cool. So I think like bringing it back on topic with like the communication, and I know like I'm, so victim to this and my own sort of inner self-talk whenever I'm gearing up for a, important conversation or, even this talk, going through a lot of things in my head before doing it. What you're saying is like something to bring us back into the present is just bringing yourself into your own body, and by doing the vagal breathing, so really sort of focusing on breathing out longer than what you breathe in. And if you practice this, what someone from Sony Group has said is, or asked is, if you practice this over time, does this better like enable you to do it in these moments of high pressure? Or like, do you automatically, like, will that allow you to, I guess, switch into that mode out of habit?
Yep, absolutely. So 2 years ago, we ran a study with the Australian Securities Exchange, and there we trained them to relax under pressure. And what we're monitoring there was the alpha brain activity. And when we first measured this, the moment there's stress, alpha activity disappears from the brain. But after this training, which was only 5 minutes, we put them again into the stressful scenarios. And what happened was the brain started producing alpha brain waves even when the traders were under stress. So yes, over time it does allow you to relax under stressful scenarios. But the best outcome here really is that you train the nervous system to the point where stress becomes a trigger for relaxation rather than the fight or flight response. So the moment a stressful event is happening, your nervous system anticipates that even before the fight or flight mode is triggered. And this is how responsive your heart can be when these techniques are working efficiently.
Wow, that's in itself is fascinating and mind-blowing. I'm just a bit conscious of time here. It's now 12:35, so I think it's gone about half an hour. Someone has said I need to do it with my teenager and 10-year-old, which is great. I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with that. Kaushik, I know if people want to, get in touch with you later on, reach out to you for, any sort of advice, whether it be coaching or, just find out a bit more about what you do. Where should we direct them to?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. You can simply do a Google search with my name, Kaushik Ram, and my website will come up. You can follow me on the social media platforms. The handle is Dr Kaushik Ram, as it's displayed on screen. And I'm available by email or through any of the social media platforms. So that's how you can get in touch with me.
Great, mate. Thank you so much. Good luck with that work you're doing at the Brain and Mind Institute at the University of Sydney. Really looking forward to what becomes of that. That was one cool video you showed for as well. We're just asking like if we have time for Q&A. Yeah, we do. If there's any Q&A that's coming through now, if there's any other last questions, we probably got time for just one more. If anyone wants to throw something out, please shoot it out there in the chat now. I think we're pretty good though. So look, thanks everyone for joining. If you have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to Kaushik or for someone else as well in the Sterling group, and we can pass them on to Kaushik, or feel free to reach out to him directly. Okay. So thanks very much, and we'll see you guys later. Bye bye. Thanks very much, Kaushik.
Thanks everyone. All right.